Professor Emeritus Rupert Lewis, and member of the advisory board of the P.J. Patterson Institute. Dr. Gentles, who is representing the Dean of Humanities and Education, Professor Cowenberg. Dr. Zoya Kincaid, who is representing the head of the School of Education. Dr. Luce Longsworth, member of the advisory board of the P.J. Patterson Institute and director of the Sandals Corporate University. Director of the Sandals Corporate University. There we also have Professor Herbert Gale, who is the head of the Department of Sociology. We have Miss Natalie Williamson, who is the UWI Media and Communications Assistant, who has been working with us. All media houses represented today, and I think there are 9 media houses. Students, friends, distinguished guests all members of our online audience, and I especially want to welcome Professor Hopeton Dunn, who is joining us from Botswana, who is at the University of Botswana. Welcome to you all. Again, let me emphasize that this is a critical press conference, and our intention is to provide you with information that will help you to have a fairly good understanding of the establishment of the Africa-Caribbean Hub for Generative Artificial Intelligence Development. Now, let me quickly provide you with some information on the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa-Caribbean Advocacy, because I know that there are some persons who really do not know enough about who we are. The P.J. Patterson Institute was established in 2020 by the University Council on the recommendation of Vice Chancellor, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, named in honor of statesman in residence, the Most Honorable P.J. Patterson, former Prime Minister of Jamaica. The Institute is committed to the mandate of finding and focusing on opportunities for Africa, CARICOM, and the African diaspora to confront common challenges, strengthen historical and cultural ties, and build economic bridges. Among our objectives are assisting in developing the framework for the coordination of public advocacy and development partnerships between the Caribbean and Africa, developing a program of work to engage with the full range of UWI academics and pertinent research from scholars in the diaspora for the production of a strategic framework for Africa-Caribbean cooperation and action, supporting the quest for reparative justice, the fight against racism and discrimination to achieve economic and social empowerment for people of color. This press conference has been planned to announce the establishment of the Africa-Caribbean Hub for Generative Artificial Intelligence Development. The project is a collaboration between the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa-Caribbean Advocacy and the Economic Empowerment and Global Learning Project and the Policy Studies Program at Lafayette College in the USA. Allow me to recognize a few other UWI persons. I omitted to mention Dr. Paulette Carr, former campus librarian, Dr. Lindy Jones, who is representing the deputy principal, Mona Campus, Dr. Dave Goss, who is the head of the Institute of Cultural Studies. If I have neglected to mention anyone else, please just send me a reminder during the proceedings and I will make sure I mention you. We really appreciate your presence here with us today, and so I don't want to let anybody feel unidentified and unrecognized or even unthanked. Welcome to you all. Okay? Now, the project is being funded by the Africa Import-Export Bank, Afrexim Bank. And so we go now to the presentation from the President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of the African Export-Import Bank. Let me do a brief introduction of Professor Benedict Orama, who is Professor of International Trade and Finance from Adeleke University, Nigeria. He was appointed to the position of Executive Vice President of the Afrexim Bank in October 2008, a position he held until he was appointed President in June 2015. Professor Orama has published one book, Foundations of Structured Trade Finance, and has written over 30 articles on a range of African economic and trade-related matters, many of which have been published in leading international journals. We now take the video presentation of Professor Orama, so you may turn your attention to the screen.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as our economies industrialize and digitalize, it is important that we equip our young people with the relevant skills for the 21st century struggle I've just described. STEM education, entrepreneurship, and vocational training must align with the demands of the job market and the high intensity and disruptive nature of the battle we are engaging in this age of digital technology. We are witnesses to the massive disruptions caused recently by the emergence of DeepSeek. We all observe every day as nations unabashedly move to control the technology and data that underpin artificial intelligence. If we do not rise to the challenge now, we will become mere fuels that fire the development of others. The emergence of artificial intelligence, fintech, and digital trade platforms means that we must invest in research and development at scale. It's imperative that we ensure that our institutions prioritize these subjects to enhance our economic sovereignty. Africa is home to the world's youngest and fastest growing population, and the Caribbean continues to produce some of the most talented minds in the world. If we fail to equip this generation with the right education and skills, we risk an economic crisis where opportunities abound, but the talent to take advantage of the opportunities is unprepared. This is why at Afrexim Bank we have prioritized a vision for global Africa that transcends geographical boundaries to unite African and Caribbean nations and the wider African diaspora in pursuit of our collective economic prosperity and self-determination. The concept of global Africa celebrates the shared heritage and potential of African and Caribbean nations. The vision aims to empower over 2 billion people of African descent worldwide to define their economic destiny on their own terms. We are also mainstreaming human capital development as a pillar of our strategic interventions. Through the Afrexim Bank Academy, called AfraCAD, we are investing in higher education, research, and specialized training programs to empower Africa's next generation of entrepreneurs, policymakers, and innovators. We have launched partnerships with top academic institutions to ensure that the right generation of African leaders is equipped to take our people forward. We have established an entity called Canex Creations Incorporated and endowed it with venture capital for the acquisition of valuable intellectual property emanating from our people. And this intellectual property we seek covers science and technology as well as the creative industry. Our internship exchange program between Africa and the Caribbean provides young professionals with real-world exposure to businesses, trade and finance, reinforcing the cultural and the economic bridges between our regions. And I'm very pleased that the students from the University of West Indies have benefited from this program. This initiative is critical in reversing the brain drain and ensuring that our young minds stay with our economies rather than being pushed and taken outside our region. We continue to provide technical support to institutions such as the P.J. Patterson Institute, whose works are essential for deepening intellectual exchange and collaboration between our two regions. Pleased to inform you that we have approved grant financing to support the establishment of the Africa-Caribbean Hub for Generative Artificial Intelligence at P.J. Patterson Institute. We welcome discussions on a possible multi-year expanded relationship to support the operations and amplify the impact of the work of the P.J. Patterson Institute. We also look forward to your engagement with our Canes Creations Incorporated to support the possible commercialization of products of the Institute. Our commitment to this and similar institutions reflects our belief that knowledge sharing between Africa and the Caribbean can be a powerful tool for our collective transformation.
Thank you very much. We want to reiterate our thanks to Professor Orama, who is very committed to the position, the view that education is the eventual vehicle, path to liberation for African and Caribbean peoples, for people in the diaspora. I thank him too for underlining the importance of the collaboration between the Caribbean and Africa. I would now like to introduce the Most Honorable P.J. Patterson. Really does not need an introduction, but I will still respectfully introduce our statesman. The Most Honorable P.J. Patterson is a Caribbean statesman who has dedicated over 6 decades to fostering social and economic transformation in Jamaica, the Caribbean, and the African diaspora in general. Mr. Patterson holds an honors degree in English from the University of the West Indies and a law degree from the London School of Economics. Mr. Patterson is a former Prime Minister of Jamaica and in retirement, on paper, he continues his advocacy as the statesman in residence at the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa, Caribbean Advocacy at the University of the West Indies, focusing on fostering collaboration between Africa and the Caribbean. He is the author of many materials, but one very outstanding work of his is his book, My Political Journey, a very highly celebrated memoir. Mr. Patterson, could you now present your statement?
Colleagues and friends, pardon me if I begin on a note of nostalgia. It is 71 years ago that I entered these hallowed precincts. At that time, only 3 of those whose portraits now appear on the wall would have been there. Principal Taylor, before I came, the then current principal, Dr. Graves, and of course, the Chancellor, Princess Alice. I feel that the wheel has come more than full circle this morning. thank you all for being present to share this historic moment with us. On April 12th, when we unveiled the mural of the Pan-Africanists, the Institute announced that we would formally launch in early June the pilot study for an AI hub to advance education, research, finance, trade, and industrial development for Africa and the Caribbean. We are pleased to be able to do so today as we seek to build an edifice of technological innovation in which we deploy our assets within the global economy to leverage our own human capital and resource base under our own sovereign control to promote our shared prosperity. As you have heard from Professor O'Mara, we have obtained some seed funding from the African Export-Import Bank to develop a working design to integrate African and Caribbean countries into new, mutually beneficial logistics and enhanced intelligence partnerships aimed at harnessing synergies and fostering synthesis in economic and business collaboration. The goal of this envisioned paradigm is to spearhead the development of generative artificial intelligence industries in these regions into localized, knowledge-intensive, and value and wealth-creating, globally competitive industries based primarily on the leveraging of our natural resources, our talent pools, and to secure growth in digital ecosystems. A wide range of industries in African and Caribbean economies will benefit significantly from the resulting knowledge spillover. What we're seeking to do is to fashion an AI ecosystem that drives economic growth so as to ensure that the specific challenges and opportunities of the 6 regions which constitute global Africa are fully integrated into the global technological landscape. Generative AI, as we know, is rapidly reshaping industries across the entire globe, from healthcare and education to finance and manufacturing to tourism and entertainment. However, the regions of Africa and the Caribbean have until now remained underrepresented in that technological revolution. Yes, we are rich in natural resources, including minerals for AI infrastructure, such as cobalt, lithium, and even some elements of rare earth. We also have the presence of young, digitally savvy populations, but we lack the structured linkages and there's not the effective collaboration between the 6 regions. That has imposed a limit of our participation in emerging technologies. I endorse what Professor O'Mara has said. We cannot afford for Africa and the Caribbean to remain largely excluded from global technological development discussions, especially in cutting-edge sectors like AI. The proposed hub will seek to bridge this gap by uniting Africa and the Caribbean, by catalyzing economic partnerships and fostering innovation in AI. Moreover, as global demand for AI grows, the invaluable need for ethically sourced natural resources and policy frameworks for inclusive wealth creation becomes critical. And I mention wealth creation without any apology. We have been resilient for centuries. It's time to move to prosperity. We believe that through this initiative, Africa and the Caribbean can ensure that our economic interests are protected and that we have a say in the advancement of AI technologies, particularly surrounding issues like data governance, resource sustainability, and the socio-economic impacts of automation. We have 5 clear objectives. Let me say what they are. We want to foster economic integration, to establish a collaborative hub that fosters economic linkages between Africa and the Caribbean, particularly in the sectors of generative AI and resource extraction for AI infrastructure. We're seeking to promote technological development, to build and strengthen capacities in generative AI research and development in both Africa and the Caribbean, by creating training programs, research partnerships, and startup incubators. We want to promote resource sustainability and governance, to promote ethical sourcing and the sustainable management of critical natural resources which are necessary for AI technologies. We want to ensure that Africa and the Caribbean no longer continue to be mere providers of the raw materials, but active and meaningful participants in the AI value chain. We want to emphasize social inclusion, to integrate local knowledge systems and the socio-economic needs of African and Caribbean populations into the global development of AI, ensuring that AI solutions address regional challenges such as climate adaptation, food security, and educational access. We want to support policy and advocacy that influences global AI policy frameworks to ensure Africa and the Caribbean are not sidelined, but that their voices are actively included in shaping the future of this critical industry. The P.J. Patterson Institute was spawned by the University of the West Indies. And shortly, you will be hearing from the Pro-Vice Chancellor responsible for global affairs about initiatives in which the university will shortly be engaged, and those, of course, will ultimately be announced by the Vice Chancellor himself in due course. We simply want to say very simply that the work we undertake will be fully aligned with the work to be undertaken by the Institute. There will be the closest possible collaboration between us, and we regard ourselves as an integral participant in the entire exercise in which the university is involved. We are particularly happy to be joined in this initiative by Lafayette College. It has done so to perpetuate its high renown for scholarship and interdisciplinary research. And the person assigned by the Lafayette University, who is now on enhanced sabbatical for a year, is extremely well known to us. We know him for his work here as head of the PIOJ. He also happens to be a distinguished scholar of the Institute, and Professor Gladstone Hutchinson will be serving as the principal project director. Professor Ramsey, as a research fellow in the Institute, will be the co-director, and we have been able to persuade the retiring librarian to make her time and her skills and her experience available to us, and we want to welcome Dr. Paulette Carr as an integral participant in the exercise. We regard this project as an essential element in fulfilling our mandate as we seek to expand and strengthen our structural capacity as Africa and the Caribbean move to coordinate public policy and advocacy that will lead to the unity and development of our nations and our people. This is the time for a dynamic thrust in the flow of our collective will to forge economic links between our diverse and complementary resources and endowments. We are pleased to embark on this initiative, which we believe is a critical tool for the people of global Africa to chart our own economic course and thereby realize our true destiny. Thank you.
So we all are well accustomed to the clarity with which our statesman delivers And so I'm sure all his meanings are clear, and you'll all walk away with a riveting line in your heads. Thank you very much, sir. Before I introduce PVC Maynard, I'm reminded that a number of persons entered the room since our initial introductions. Dr. Diane Barkley is here representing Professor Kanyu PVC, Professor Kanyu Thompson PVC for the Board of Undergraduate Studies. Thank you very much. PVC Audrey Lee Henry also walked in. PVC for the Board of Graduate Research. Welcome, Professor. Dr. Deborah Hickling, who is an associate of the Institute, also walked in a short while ago. And I should also recognize two members of our staff, Mr. Michael Hilton, who is our Chief Research Officer, and Mr. Omar Ryan, who is our Events Coordinator. And somebody said I hadn't introduced myself. I thought I was in academic board or faculty board where everybody knows me. So my name is Paulette Ramsey, and I'm the research fellow, as Mr. Patterson just said, at the Institute. Thank you. I'll now introduce PVC Sandra Maynard, who has been a qualified barrister at law since 1998 and has practiced both privately, domestically and internationally, and for the United Kingdom's Crown Prosecution Service. She has held senior leadership and management roles within UK universities across the sectors of law, business, and university group subsidiaries, both nationally and regionally. She has also managed multidisciplinary and multifunctional teams through globally disruptive changes such as Brexit and COVID. She's currently president and CEO of the ISDJ and at the UWI Pro Vice Chancellor, Office of Global Affairs. Ms. Maynard, would you kindly make your statement? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ramsey. And this is a long list of very distinguished persons here today. So I'd like to stand on the protocols already established. And to just say that it is a pleasure to be here. It also has always been a pleasure since I've begun here at the University of the West Indies to work alongside Mr. Patterson and the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa and Caribbean Advocacy. Now, the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, through my office at the Office of Global Affairs, has been supporting the work of the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa, Caribbean Advocacy. And today we are witnessing its evolution into the era of artificial intelligence. Now, we have heard from Mr. Patterson, and we see that they are moving with the times, as I like to say, and identifying that close cooperation between Africa and the Caribbean, and the importance of the evolution of what we are now facing in the world today. And when we look at generative, as we call it, AI, we should really also be looking at unlocking the potential between Africa and the Caribbean as identified by Mr. Patterson a short while ago. We have also seen a significant advancement within the digital space. Some of us, I will say, have adapted well, others are still resisting. But we are now evolving even further into the fifth industrial revolution, and that is of generative AI. So those of us that are resisting change, we cannot resist any further. We have to jump on as we say, the bandwagon and let's get moving. Now, this revolution is important, particularly here within the region, because it is advancing at a significant rate around the rest of the world. And in this modern phase of industrialization, we are looking at the emphasis on AI, of course, and of course human-machine collaboration. We must never forget the focus on sustainability and human well-being as part of this development. Now, AI has significant potential. It has potential to revolutionize international trade and many other areas affecting our lives. But I would just say this, that we must have a sense of responsibility and caution, crucially, in this approach. And we must remember that that sense of responsibility is important globally. Now, AI, by addressing the challenges, we can embrace the opportunities that are there for the taking. And as Mr. Patterson mentioned, there's a lot of talent within our regions between the Caribbean and Africa. And we really need to ensure that we can take the opportunity to maximize that potential. Just as an example, about a month ago, I had the pleasure of attending a hackathon here in Jamaica, part of a project that the EU is working with. And there were 640-something young people from high school all the way up to tertiary education. The talent that I saw coming out of that room on a 24-hour hackathon to create an AI tool to help advance social responsibilities, to help us in our everyday life. And it filled me with absolute delight. I was energized, having just done an enormously long flight. I still was energized just by the sheer potential just here in Kingston. So as you can appreciate, it's going to be multiplied so many times further as we work across the region and, of course, Africa. Now, the University of the West Indies, across all its campuses, has already embarked on this explorative journey in relation to the uses of AI in areas of research, innovation, advocacy, awareness, and, very importantly, teaching and learning. And that is important because we have to support this innovation. We have to support this activity. And education is essential to the ongoing development of this region. So I am here wishing PJ Patterson Institute the very, very best in the launch of this initiative. So thank you all very much, and I wish you the very best, Mr. Patterson. Thank you.
Thank you, PVC Maynard. I would like to now introduce Dr. Daniel Folcom. Dr. Folcom is here in his own right as head of the Department of Computing, but he's also representing Professor Denzel Williams, principal of the Mona campus, who is away on management retreat. Dr. Daniel Folcom is a senior lecturer in computer science and head of the Department of Computing at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus, Jamaica. He received his PhD degree in computer science from the University of Kansas in 2010 and is a member of the IEEE Computer Society, IEEE Communication Society, and the ACM. He has published widely in the field of computer science in several important journals, both regionally and internationally. Dr. Folcom, I now invite you to present your statement.
Thank you, Professor Ramsey. It's a long list of very distinguished guests, so I would also like to stand on protocols already established and welcome them. Good morning. Professor Denzel Williams, principal of the campus, is unable to attend, but he congratulates the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa Caribbean Advocacy on the launch of the Africa Caribbean Hub for Generative Artificial Intelligence, and he adds that the Mona campus is supportive of the initiative and looks forward to lending its support to advancing the agenda. Now, there is a lot of contemporary excitement around artificial intelligence, but the term itself actually dates back to 1955, so almost 70 years ago. And the early days of artificial intelligence saw work on machine learning. And the first machine learning algorithm was actually developed in 1952, so 3 years ago, by someone called Arthur Sample to play checkers and drafts. Now, the early years of artificial intelligence saw work on technical concepts such as backpropagation, which is basically a process of propagating errors backwards as the program learns. And there's also been work on artificial neural networks. And the current excitement around artificial intelligence is actually focused on generative AI, which builds on that work that was done earlier. Now, it's commendable that the Hub aims to build and strengthen capacities in generative AI research and development in both Africa and the Caribbean through training programs, research partnerships, and startup incubators. However, permit me to dream a bit and suggest that the Institute not only focus on generative AI, but AI more broadly, or artificial intelligence more broadly. And it's also important to focus on the underlying computer science. Why? Recently, I just came across an article that mentioned that this current boom that we're seeing with generative AI is built on earlier work on high performance, and that work continues even to this day. And so, as you know, the AI Hub focuses on its objectives, I would also recommend that attention be paid and research funding to the computer science building blocks for the technology that we are seeing. And since I mentioned high performance computing, I'll also mention that Carla, the Latin American High Performance Computing Conference, is actually going to hold its next meeting right here in Kingston, Jamaica in September of this year. And there should be at least one track on high performance computing and AI. This will be more technical papers in computer science. Now, common acronym with artificial intelligence research is FATE. And it stands for fairness, accountability, transparency, and ethics in AI. And some of the previous speakers have already alluded to that. And since the Hub aims to integrate local knowledge systems and the socioeconomic needs of African and Caribbean populations into the global development of AI, I would also urge that FATE be a very important component of AI research and development in the region. And then another thing I would recommend is, again, recent research shows that generative AI queries will consume 5 to 10 times more energy than your ordinary web search. And in regions where we have irregular power or expensive power, it's also important for us to contend with the costs of building these generative AI models. And so as the Hub examines this, I would also recommend funding into the computation of the costs for building models for our region, and also to determine if it's better to build smaller and more specialized models that are tuned to our specific context. So the future of artificial intelligence is quite exciting, and I commend the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa Caribbean Advocacy for coming up with this vision for this AI Hub, and I also thank the Afrexim Bank for its funding support. And I look forward to the work that the hub will do to spur further development of artificial intelligence in both regions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Folcom. I'll invite you to hold conversations with Professor Gladstone Hutchinson when we are done. So then you can continue the conversations the discussion of the ideas that you are advancing, highlighting, underlining. Thank you. I'll now introduce Professor Gladstone Hutchinson, who will be the principal coordinator, director of the project. Professor Hutchinson is Professor of Economics, Gladstone Whitman 1949 Endowment Funds in Lafayette College, USA. Professor Gladstone Hutchinson is a distinguished scholar at the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa Caribbean Advocacy. He is also Director of Public Economics and Economic Development at Lafayette College. Lafayette College is in Pennsylvania. Since 1997, he has been the founding director of Lafayette College's nationally recognized Economic Empowerment and Global Learning Project, EEGLP. His scholarship, teaching, project-based problem solving, and policy advising focuses on the important synthesis between public economics, the private economy, civil society, entrepreneurship, innovation, and business development in designing resilient and dynamic ecosystems that foster economic development and human prosperity. Professor Hutchinson previously served as Dean of Studies at Lafayette and as Executive Chairman and Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica. He's a recipient of the Medal of Appreciation for contributions to Jamaica's economic and national development from the Prime Minister of Jamaica, and most recently an honorary doctorate in humane letters from his alma mater, the State University of New York at Oneonta, in recognition of his contributions to economic development internationally and within the United States of America. Professor Hutchinson will now present an overview of the project to give you a better understanding of what it entails, or what it will entail. Professor Hutchinson, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ramsey. Just two things, can you hear me? Two things I should just say by introduction. One is when Professor Ramsey spoke about my honorary doctorate of humane letters from State University of New York, I immediately looked over to Professor Hall, who was then, I think, running my institution in some way when I was there as a student. And secondly, I was pleased to see Professor Rupert Lewis here, because April 1990, Professor Rupert Lewis challenged me to use my commitment to public economics and markets and private markets to help develop pathways for development and prosperity. I don't know if you recall that conversation. Yeah? But right when you were, because I taught here for a year, right? And Professor Lewis, I remember you saying to me, you gotta show that there's more to what you do than just academics of it. And so I'm happy to see you here, because I think what we are trying to accomplish today goes right to the heart of that conversation that we had in 1990. Yeah? So I just wanted to know that. So I think we have laid out both the Honorable Patterson, who is the global statesman for this project, and I've heard what he talked about, the importance of not just focusing on generative artificial intelligence, right? Because there's an appreciation that generative artificial intelligence is now basically the last mile, right, of the AI thing, and then there's a whole series of foundations that have to go before that, whether it is a digital platform, whether it is building out the technology basis, whether it is allowing for the knowledge to flow into the intermediary components of a society, or to have the spillover effect that the Honorable Patterson spoke about. For all of those things to arrive at why we are here, the most consequential moment in my life, where we have an opportunity to move with intentionality on what statesman Patterson spoke about, taking charge of the ownership and the responsibility of transforming our lives, our communities, our nation, our economies into places that we value, places that we can achieve our aspirations, places that can give us the flourishment that is so critical. This is the moment I think that we have, and I think this is, and the university, by launching this, has shown that it understands what it is to be the fulcrum of this really important moment. I should just add why this moment is important. And I'm not so sure, but I will add why it is important. As you know, the World Bank, both in April and in January of this year, put out the reports that declared that without substantial change or pivoting, sub-Saharan Africa, that was 12% of global poverty in 1990, is on track to, in 2030, 5 more years, represent 80% of global poverty. And this is despite the fact that they have been managing their economies better than ever. Better than ever. Jamaica is celebrating bringing their debt to GDP down to 70%. The average African economy debt to GDP is between 45 and 50%. They have had stability, and their economies are not being sufficiently dynamic because of the things that have been said about their resources have been going out, and they still have an extractive nature to their economies, which then prevent them from getting the higher value returns that can be used for the source of the creation of inclusive wealth. And so we understand this moment that they are, and by the way, it's not just sub-Saharan Africa, because just last week, Friday, the IMF put out their report and the World Bank put it out, that Latin America and the Caribbean, as we speak, now have the slowest region of growth anywhere in the world. And they're projecting that through 2027, 2028. So I believe that this project, this moment that the statesman laid out, represents an extraordinary consequential moment, because if we are able to achieve or to move it and achieve some of these ends, we would have made that important pivot, not only in terms of the wealth, not only in terms of the prosperity, but in terms of the psychology of knowing that we are in charge of our destiny, our fate, the things that Rupert and I used to talk a lot about when I was here teaching, to take charge of our lives to do this. So I want to use it as a kind of a context to say that the Institute and the university and the Africa Exim Bank, understanding the cruciality of financing the thinking about this is important. For me, it's really important. I served under Mr. Palestine as Prime Minister, right? 96 through 2000, right? Where, again, it was the same motivation. He had successfully taken Jamaica out of the IMF, and he wanted to now start to own the responsibilities of development. And so I was a part of being able to do that. But now we are back to another such crucial moment where we're going to try and see, can artificial intelligence not just focus on the generative parts, but focus on the technology overall, the modernization and spillover effects into the other industries which are not directly related, but that modernization, right, which then raises the value added, raises the company productivity, and raises the opportunity for people to create value in their spaces that they value the most, called their homes and their nations. So I think that that is the goal that we are going to seek to achieve here. And what I will do, I have a formal presentation that I would be happy to have Professor Ramsey share, but I will, unfortunately, you just have to listen to me talk about some aspects of it, rather than it being set up for me to go through. Right? So I'll just talk about some aspects of it. So, what had triggered this moment initially was the Africa Exim Bank in trying to partner now with global and create this global Africa. Their first initiation was to explore it through expanding trade. So my initial work was on trying to build a food security and trade relationship thing. Of course, by the Africa Bank own assessment, trade between the regions amount to less than 1% of their economic activities. It doesn't mean it cannot grow, but because they were all in an extractive mode, it means that they lacked distinctive comparative advantages between each other. They were all selling their primary products in trade. And so it would take for the development of each of these countries to then have their distinctive forms, for them to have distinctive differences in the nature of what they produce and sell, for trade itself to move, unless they were going to take guidance from what statesman Patterson said. And I was in that room last year when he said it, and you could have heard a pin drop among the 7,000 persons there. You may be able to use your resources not just as trade, but also as an equity investment in the creation of the supply chain components in the artificial intelligence industry. In other words, your lithium, your cobalt, your rare earth, rather than trading it for us a one-term benefit, can also be used as almost like a sovereign wealth fund, investment in the creation of fabrication plants, right? Used in the making of data centers. And so that then gives multi-generational benefit and wealth, as opposed to just trading and doing that. And we don't have to make it up. You can look and you can see that UAE and Saudi Arabia and all these places are using their oil wealth to invest in artificial intelligence fabrication plants and data centers all over the world. That's oil. And they're using oil wealth to be at the forefront of artificial intelligence, ownership of the infrastructure of it. Mr. Patterson was just making Africa and the Caribbean appreciate that they also can do that. And then that did then allow them to create the multi-generational wealth, which then can be used to achieve some of the developmental aims and human flourishment that we do, that we seek. I think he also then, you could appreciate, and you will do it, in that there are significant knowledge spillover that comes from investing in this. 1971, Korea built their Korea Center for Science and Technology, right? Korea Institute for Science and Technology. They had MIT and Stanford partner with them, and USA. Right now, I think it is ranked as the 35th or 36th best global university in the world. And the people who went there are all now the senior leaders in Samsung, Daewoo, and Hyundai. They've spilled over into the creation and the modernization of their major industries. And so Kenya last year decided to build a technology city, and they've invited Korea to come in and to replicate what they did in Kenya's technology city. And they say they're going to try and do the same thing, build this massive technological footprint, of which AI is a part of it, but the technology itself is going to enrich the through knowledge spillover in the other industries, not only in Kenya, but in the Great Lakes region, whether it is Tanzania, whether it is Democratic Republic of Congo, all those other countries around, and they're going to allow those countries to use their rare earth to invest in the fabrication and the data centers in Kenya so that it is locally owned and it can be distributed the benefit throughout for their development. So, on one hand, the centrality of this effort at the University of the West Indies portends well in that it then can lead to the kind of knowledge spillover into all the other sectors which are not AI specific, but will benefit from AI trained people who can bring greater creativity, greater problem solving, greater fourth, fifth generation AI, which is creativity and imagination as a source of value, and so on and so on. It can do all those things. I know that well. Last year this time I was in Moldova, which is where I'm still doing my other project, and that project was started by President Reagan and President Gorbachev to try and do that work there. And Moldova is moving from the Soviet Union to try and move into the European Union, and I'm there to help them in that transition. And I'm using generative AI because they are suffering from what we call bounded imagination. They can't imagine their future being different from their past. They've resigned themselves to being that way. And so if we use generative IA, do asset mapping, to, like I did in Trenchtown, to have their imaginations of things, and then have AI process that aspiration, and then when they see it and they agree with it, then reverse engineer it to the foundations and the instrumental aspects of what needs to be in place for them to realize their aspiration. So AI has these different properties that it can use to partner now in the development of economic development, economic modernization, the creation of new industries. I think the creation of other kinds of the efficiency of existing industries, the digital platform on which you can do financial intermediation into the tributaries of your community. You can bypass the rigidities of institutions or bypass the rigidities of whatever you want to call it. Professor, you should know that, you work in this area, right? But you can get into those tributaries by using a way in which you can use the internet to do that, right? And so, by way of an introduction, I would just say that all of these things, AI has the ability to try and set up to do. What makes this project particularly relevant and calibrated for global Africa is because the two regions with the most rare earth or minerals for rare earth are Asia and global Africa. They have the most of the rare earth properties that can drive the industry. There's a reason why Secretary Rubio went to the Great Lakes to go negotiate, quote unquote, a peace treaty between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And to say that if you do that, we will bring in America's infrastructure and technology and we will own 30% of it, because 90% of all the cobalt that is needed to drive the AI industry comes right from that area. It comes right from that area. There's a reason why Secretary Rubio went to Guyana and declared that if you can create, between you and Suriname can create access to your high-grade oil, we can partner with you in making you be the AI center of the region. You can go online and you can see that presentation. So the issue is, are you going to make the same structure, global capitalist structure of its institutions and the way it does property rights, the way it does ownership rights? Are you going to make that then control and create new forms of extractiveness? Or are you going to have an internal process where you are able to own, as Professor Omar Arano said, and Station Vice, own your capital, use it to shape how you want to interface in global markets, how you want to make that be a source of value creation for your own development and prosperity aims. To me, that is a crucial where we're at right now, where the global capital is interested in moving in to shape that space, and the university, through statesman Patterson, is keenly and alertly saying we can circumvent that process by building in place the infrastructure and the relationship to do this. Now, there's some sweet science to how one does this, right? I specialize in public economics, and what that means in essence is that I specialize in making people who are disparately motivated, people who dislike each other and hate each other, understand the commonalities that they have, where it requires the healthiness of each other for the production of that commonality. So, because of that, I understand the science behind why the Great Lakes countries will stop their fighting over the fresh water and everything for an opportunity for their self-development. I understand why the global Africa will, in the ECOWAS region, to this other region, will say, let us look at what we can produce collaboratively and cooperatively for wealth creation, as opposed to what we are fighting about. And let that now be what drives what we enterprise and institutionalize for the securing of wealth for our transformation. So the goal then in this exercise, right, is to work with, we're trying to set up now for this work 3 pilots. That's the first 2 years, 3 pilots. 1 in the CARICOM region, 2 in the Africa regions. The pilots are going to allow us to understand how we, and there's a reason why we do the pilots in that way, because they all represent something different. In the Great Lakes area, they represent what we call a common pool problem. Think of Hellshire Beach. You can, or think of a fishery. You can overconsume, you can overfish. So you need to have some commonality in how you determine the rate at which you fish. So you know, Jamaica at certain times of the year, you can't do certain kind of fishing. That's the way in which disparate people work together to make sure that they can have sustainability in fishing. And the same thing is going to have to be done, right, with how we think of these areas, right? And so you could imagine in the Great Lakes area where they have been having difficulty over the property lines of the fresh water, right? and who is damming up upstream and denying this and that, you could now create an opportunity where they see where they can actually find ways where working cooperatively can advance their national interests and the regional interests more than if they worked independently or as rivals. And so we are interested in figuring out how can a pilot set up AI and its wealth, AI and its creation of value, AI and its contribution to prosperity as the common property good that would want to make countries then work collaboratively together with, despite everything else. The same thing in the Caribbean, same thing in the ECOWAS region. So each of these regions face a different nature of challenge. But you could imagine that in these different natures of challenge, the pilot is able to go in and to do a kind of a public scholarship, right, where you are engaging and learning and understanding what would allow people to work collaboratively and cooperatively around the production of the transformation that AI represents for their nation and their general region. That is the public good. AI's transformation and pivoting away from you just continuously exporting your primary product rather than you are now exporting value-added products, you using your primary product into being an investment in the supply chain infrastructure of it, and so on and so forth. So it's a different kind of imagination, a different kind of value chain that you are trying to use the 2 years of pilot to try and understand how and why and the properties of developing that kind of a cooperation across disparate interests for the production of the AI output which is necessary. And the best way for us to do that is going to be at a place like at the University of West Indies, which then can also then develop study programs around it, can develop ways to understand what is being observed, can develop students who are thinking across disciplines, students who are solving the wicked problems of our time, which are non-linear, because they are seeing and they are able to use things to do this and to think about it in these ways. So the first goal that we have is to create the conditions for the pilots to have an opportunity to be pursued meaningfully. And I'm really excited for Dr. Carr to be a partner, and along with everyone that's been a partner with this. And that's why, my year-long sabbatical was aimed at the work I was doing, which was building off Gorbachev and Reagan in this. And I have pivoted that and moved now, and my school has approved of me to use it to focus exclusively on this project. Right? And it's enlightened self-interest. They don't do that because they love me or the Caribbean. They do that because because higher ed in the United States, among elite institutions, have to pivot very hard towards project-based learning and away from classroom learning. They have to move aggressively towards project-based learning. So my endowment allows me to do projects in Moldova, in Baltimore, in Appalachia, in Honduras, anywhere in the world, for students to have that project and to learn how to problem solve across these things. So we can also imagine the same thing going on at this great university, where people now can use this project at the Policy Institute to also make as part of their learning and their scholarship, right? Yes, learning and their scholarship, thinking across how to problem solve and how to create value. Problem solve and create value in this what, right? I see my times in this what The Economist magazine calls one of the great issues of the 21st century. How do we explain that Africa and Africans have learned to manage their economy better than they've ever done, and they're falling behind at a faster pace? They say this is one of the great challenges of the 21st century, to explain that conundrum. The idea that the 1980s were the last decade for Latin America, and now they are saying that was the best decade they've had. How do we explain that conundrum? And so we believe that the Palestine Institute can be at the centrality, can be the fulcrum with the university in being able to think through not only how to create value, but how to also problem solve some of these different dimensions. My time is up. I'm free for questions, and like I said, I have a PowerPoint and a presentation I'd be happy to share with you, which does all of this. I'm done. I've been instructed to shut up.
How long is your PowerPoint? Is your PowerPoint 2 minutes long?
Huh?
How long is the PowerPoint? You're done.
These are just the themes of it, and what is it? It is set up where I can give it to you, and you can post it, and it has all the data and the information about everything I just said.
Okay, thank you very much.
So everyone can get it, and they can see it, and they can see everything that is there. Yeah?
Thank you very much.
You can tell everybody on the website.
We are about to move into the question and answer session, so different persons will get an opportunity to invite you to further elucidate on any point they wanted to hear and didn't hear, and so on. So thank you very much, Professor Hutchinson. I want to invite Ms. Natalie Williamson to lead the question and answer session. But before doing that, I'm going to ask her to name the media houses that are represented here, and then we'll open the floor for the question and answer, which will be moderated by Ms. Williamson. And Ms. Williamson is from our UWI Mona Marketing and Communications Office. Thank you.
Raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged. For those participating online, please use the online platform available. We ask that you state your name and the media entity after being acknowledged. We encourage concise questions to allow us to address as many as possible. Thank you. Any question? Yeah. Go right ahead.
resources that we've spoken of in terms of the minerals and so on.
And your name again, I'm sorry? Alicia. Thank you for your question, right? It's, I think the Honorable Statesman spoke to you yesterday because what he told me to prepare is exactly what you asked, right? and so literally, right, in my PowerPoint, I have the 5 goals of the, right, the 5 goals of the project, right? But yeah, anyway, let me just answer your question, the last question first. The untapped potential. Here is the danger. If you look at global entrepreneurship, the countries that have the least infrastructure, the least access to capital, actually have the highest rate of entrepreneurship, but the lowest rate of its transformation to market. You have other countries which have great ability to transform things to market without being entrepreneurial, and so they basically try to get other people to come to their countries with their ideas, to work with their companies. And you can go online, you can see many countries that do that. They offer things like green card to bring your idea and work with your companies. So the issue then is, how do we get, like for example, I think it stuck in my mind when I heard you speak a month ago, or 2 months ago, about the university students who won this award. Is it you were talking about? Won this award, and for some robotic or technology something, right? And huh?
Yeah, and the hackathon, it was just, yeah.
Yes. Yes, and I was listening to hear, okay, how has this now become, they've worked through it has now been launched, you know, and they now have, they've gotten, you know, they've worked with a business school and they've gotten, but I was a little frightened to ask because it was sounding like what I see across Africa and among in the school, where good ideas never get a chance to be invested in for their development, to get out and to become products or marketing the products. And so I cannot tell you what is the value of the untapped potential, because I cannot tell you about the process by that potential and that creativity being transformed into value. But that is why this project is so monumental, because on the digital platform, you then have the financial intermediation processes where people then can get access to funds to address and to monetize the exploration of their project and their ideas, especially at the level where they need angel funding or mezzanine funding to get it into the bridge, right? They can do that. And there's some fantastic ideas about how they could. You know, I mean, I recall one idea that when I was here as Director General, a lot of folks were saying the General Penitentiary could be moved somewhere else and that become a major business hub where young people could go then and they could explore and get financing to build their ideas out. But it's going to take access to funds in a way that can get into the tributaries, and they're going to have to ride on the digital platform rather than people having to be walking around with lots of money. Okay. But this is what, and then I could better answer your question, what is the potential? I can look at the rate of failure and what is the potential for this to be transformed into creating the kind of wealth that we're talking about. Am I answering your question? What sense? Thank you. Can I just respond back to that? So if you go online and you look at Oxford University greens, it's lined with ropes and it says don't walk on the grass. And the dons can walk on the inside and the students can walk on the outside and speak to the dons. If you go to Harvard or my institution, which is out at Harvard, which are demonstrations, you'll be surprised that nothing there looks like a green, right? Or my institution, they made people walk around like free-range chickens, and they saw where they cut the path of walking when the sun is out, when the sun is out, and then after they see that, they put in the path. What am I saying to you? Regulating and limiting the scope of a new industry before you understand its potential to get into different tributaries to create value, you underserve its potential. You underserve its potential. So I hear you and you're right, but I want to see what happens with the creative class in Jamaica. We were voted one of the most creative societies in the world by UNICEF. I would like to understand what that means for the aspect of the Industrial Revolution, which is based on creativity and imagination as a source of economic value. That was made for the Caribbean and Africa.
Thank you so much for clarity. Is there another question? Good afternoon, colleagues. Afternoon, our distinguished guests and statesmen. I just have a question. We keep speaking about Africa, but which countries in Africa are we specifically talking about? So I'm just curious about that.
Let me take that one. As we have said, this project is receiving some grant funding from Afrexim Bank. No decision has yet been taken as to the particular countries where the initial pilot hub centers will be established. However, Afrexim Bank is having their 32nd annual meeting in Abuja at the end of June. And both the project director and myself have been invited to be in attendance at that meeting. And we have already asked Afrexim Bank to set up meetings which will allow us to discuss with countries that are particularly interested which one is best suited. We have in mind one on the western coast and one on the eastern coast. But we have not yet concluded which countries would be the ones where the pilot center will be located. In the same way, there has been yet no final determination of where the Caribbean Center will be located.
Can I just make a quick jump on that too? Because there's a second level to your question, which I think you were asking, and if you were not, then I'm going to pretend you did. When we go into these places, the most important thing is, can they trust that you're not now a Trojan horse for a new form of extraction? And extraction doesn't just mean taking it out of country. As you know, the Nobel Prize winners in economics last year, Why Nations Fail, their entire thesis is about the difference between inclusive institutions and extractive institutions. And extractive institutions only mean that the resources and the rewards for them go to a narrow band. Even if it doesn't leave the country, it goes to a narrow band. It's not used inclusively. So it is very important for the global statesman and myself to have these meetings of trust building for people to then invite us to engage in a more in deeper dialogue about what we are trying to do. Because essentially, if they don't trust you, right? You know, economics is based on it. Only 20% of the money that you put in the bank stays. The moment that you distrust the bank, you have a run on the bank, and your system collapses. The same thing happens here. So the first thing we have to do is trust build. And then after trust build, we can then build cooperation build. So that's, yeah.
Thank you so much. RJR, could you go right ahead? Sorry, Cleaner.
It's actually Corey Robinson from Being a Company. No, forgive my tardiness and my layman mind, but what exactly is, logistically, what exactly is the hub supposed to do? And what exactly will be entailed in the pilot project that you mentioned?
What is the hub supposed to do?
Yeah, and how will it function?
So there are 5 dimensions, right, that to the initial hub. The first thing is we're going to be looking at the development of artificial intelligence, right, around the development of artificial intelligence, what it is going to mean in this space, how it is going to be calibrated to be a source of value creation. For example, across Africa, there is some concern about it that essentially ChatGTP only answers questions based on the interpretation of the language that it understands. So for example, if the use of language is French or European English, then it doesn't have the ability to process a question that relates to one of the African countries in the way that it would for another thing. I don't make it up, that's a Brooklyn study, I have to share it with you. So you may want to have generative artificial intelligence that can bridge that gap and be able to create greater translation ability so it can problem solve better, or it can value create better in a different space. So the first thing that we're interested in doing is looking at the development of the technology itself, the extent to which it is reflective of the needs of the environment that it is trying to create value in. The second, and again, I have something I can tell you more. The second thing is the efficient and resilient security and management of the minerals, chemicals, and energy needs. Very important, right? These are very energy intensive. Two fabrication plants probably use as much energy as all of Jamaica. That's why in the US, you notice that they can't build them onshore. They are very, very energy intensive. So what it means is that we have to figure out that, and we cannot have, any insecurity over the high intellectual, knowledge intensive properties that are being used to create fabrications to drive your cell phone, drive your car, drive your fridge, do your things like that.
So,
yeah.
So listen, so once this hub is formed, you'll have a group of persons from different entities from Jamaica and overseas.
Can you speak into the mic? I'd love to hear.
No, I'm just trying to understand how it will work. The hub. You're saying once this is launched, right, you'll have different persons from Jamaica and overseas ferreting out those
different stakeholders.
Different stakeholders.
Yeah.
Addressing those issues.
As we try to build out, right, the prototype that will have some mobility and because everything we're trying to do is to address a regional issue.
Yeah.
We're not trying to do a national development. We're trying to do a regional development. So the knowledge spillover is what makes development work. So this is not a private enterprise where you are going to try and just make your private product for you so you can make some money for yourself. The goal of this is to modernize your economic development, modernize your technology, modernize your things so that you don't have this where for 25 years much of the Caribbean countries have been experiencing declining labor productivity. Right? And so you can now start to figure out how do you get knowledge intensity, skills intensity, other kind of things in that you use the artificial intelligence as in a synthetic or a synthesis way to combine with to raise the productivity so you represent a different level of competitiveness locally, globally, and your economy, and then that spills over into your Hyundai and your Daewoo and your Samsung.
So my final question, sorry. How long will the pilot last, and what happens next?
We're spending 2 years trying to build these pilots.
Okay, and then what happens after the pilots?
Huh?
What happens next?
Depends on what happens during those 2 years.
Okay.
Right? If we are able to successfully build some pilots and and they can represent demonstrated effects, and they can show that they can spill over beyond just the Naira country that they're in, then you could imagine other countries saying, you know what, we want to send our university graduates or our skilled people to come and to be a part of that technology hub, or part of that center for their development, to bring the skills back to us for our development too. And here's why this is important, the last thing I tell you, because they've now turned out Korea and Singapore and Taiwan, right, have all concluded, and China, that when they send their kids to England or America to study, they never come back. They send back only remittances. Right? I have kids from Jamaica who I bring up on scholarships. They start at 120,000 US. Right? I mean, for them to say, gee, I want to come back, or I have kids in Kenya right now, they're going to two of the top places. There's one is start 140, one start 110. Why? To go back? So they said, it turns out that when they then do the homegrown and do the training and have them do those things, and the students learn how they can contribute to the national flourishment, then they stay. And if you now read the National Science Foundation of the United States, they now say we're having a problem because the kids from these countries are now in an increasing way going back home. Going back home. That is what they just pushed out in a report 2 months ago. The kids from India, the kids from Korea, the kids from Japan, they're going back home. That's what you want to do. Make them imagine that they can contribute to their national development and flourishment.
Thank you so much. We have space for 2 other questions.
Anthony Henry, Loop News. I haven't heard anything about government input. Will there be any government input on how? Sorry, Anthony Henry, Loop News. I haven't heard anything about government input. Government input. How important is that, and when? Because we're talking about different countries. When will you see any input from various governments from the different countries in the region?
Let me deal with this. The Institute exists to support activities in the countries of Africa and the Caribbean. So too does Afreximbank. It exists for that purpose. Afreximbank has decided to support this project in order to develop a pilot study that can be made available throughout global Africa, the countries of the Caribbean and the countries of Africa. At the present time, we do not anticipate direct financial support from them in the execution of the project. But when the project is completed, they will be able to access the project or the fruits of that project based on their level of interest. And they will then have to use the pilot study to put up the requisite infrastructure within their countries that would make it possible for them to benefit from the project. We will, of course, advise all the governments, certainly of the Caribbean, that we are undertaking this project, and indicate that they will be available to access it when the study is completed.
Okay, so to think about treaties and so will be premature right now.
What's that?
To think about treaties and so cross-country treaties would be
Yes,
premature
yes.
now.
Yes, yes.
But importantly, there's an alignment, the statesman just laid out, an alignment between an enlightened government and the success of this project. Because an enlightened government would understand how the success of this project will actually reduce the cost of government delivering on its objectives, national development. And so it would be in their interest to facilitate through its complementarities the joint production and pursuit of the success of a project that is going to turn around the declining labor productivity, the declining capital productivity, the worsening of inequality, all of those things, the lack of funding into the tributaries where the creative economy can create value. So it would be in their interest, in an enlightened interest, to understand how the success of a project of this nature is a situation where the private economy can do well while doing good, and the government can do well while doing good.
All right. Thank you so much. There's another question. Go right ahead.
Once more. I'm just curious. I just wanted to hear from you. How do you say, and Mr. Folkham can weigh in on this? How do you sell AI to the average Jamaican, the parents paying for the tuition, the principal who's encouraging that child to take up this as an option in college? How do you sell AI to that person, especially in an atmosphere where Jamaicans generally are scared of online banking and so forth? How do you sell what you're preaching now?
So AI is really part of the bigger discipline in computing, and computing is actually quite popular as a major, not just here in Jamaica, in the US. Let's start with the US. I mean, some of their leading universities have, sometimes over a quarter of the undergraduate students studying computing majors. Why? Because many of these jobs the starting salaries for them are much higher than they are in other disciplines. So students are interested, they see the generative AI and they're excited. We have a capstone project in the Department of Computing, and at the end, just this year, some of our students actually had a capstone project where they had they built a model where they had trained it on regulations across the university. So you could go in and ask some questions and it would give you some answers based on the model, on the regulations. Right? So students see that, they see what's in the news, they get excited about it. And that's why they want to study it. And I think EVC may not
I'd like to respond in a sense by where I began. 71 years ago, AI was never around. I don't think you have to sell AI to students. Looking at it from the perspective of the pavilion, my experience has been that the younger you are, the more interested you are likely to be, and the more proficient you're likely to be. People are no longer confining themselves to what you might call the traditional disciplines. They're looking into new fields, new horizons, and technology and artificial intelligence as the summit of that is where so many young people are going. I don't think the effort needs to be how to entice them to go into that field. It is how to cater to the many and satisfy the demands, and the younger you are, the more innovative it seems you are likely to be. In a sense, when you are implementing a project like this, you're just trying to catch up with the new political, economic, and social and cultural realities of the world in which we live. Perhaps it's from my grandchildren even more than it is for me. And if I can just make a personal confession, 2 of my grandchildren know much more about this than I do.
If I can assist in this, anything that is new, parents are worried about, because we all came from an era where, unless you did law, accountancy, engineering, medicine, that was the traditionalist approach that people really took to, from a parent's perspective, to how do you earn money, how do you earn respect. We've evolved, because in every single one of those particular professions, what has happened is digitalization and AI has taken hold. So when you consider what we do here and what our educational institutions are doing, is we're having to acknowledge what's taking place within the world. And parents, I know, I'm one of them. Again, my grandson is much more tech savvy than I am in that respect. But I also have to deeply appreciate that that is going to be their world. It's not my world anymore. And their world is going to be dominated by this kind of evolution within this digital space. And it is for them, and it is for us here and now, to make sure that we educate them in that space so that they are prepared. From a regional perspective, the rest of the world are doing that. They're advancing, and what we don't want to be in this region is behind the curve. Because if we're not moving forward, we are, in effect, moving backwards. And so if parents are ever worried about these kind of things, I always say to parents, just think about it. Your child's daughter, son, grandson, and so forth will be there to protect your legacy. And I want people to start looking at it like that. Our region is our legacy, and we have to keep educating our young people in these areas to protect that legacy. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much.
I just
Can I just, since you said that was the last question, I just have the last word.
1 minute.
I just have the last word on that question. Right? I just put up my chart from my PowerPoint. Yeah? My chart from my PowerPoint. Fabrication plants. Fabrication plants is a sweet spot of the whole AI industry. It's where you decide, you make the chips for your phone, your fridge, everything. That's a sweet spot. As we're speaking right now, Latin America, with a growing involvement in the industry, right, only does assembly, testing, right, but they do no fabrication. Costa Rica is doing a few things. Brazil is trying to do a few things, nothing. The Caribbean has no semiconductor or fabrication facilities in the Caribbean, and no fabrication plants exist across Africa. If you can't get in at that space where the intellectual properties are locked into value creation, then it means that you are only going to be at the generative AI, which is basically I call it the derived level, right? It is the supermarket. You go to buy things. But in terms of creating value, it is at that stage where you're going to try and get the science minds and the creative minds to understand how to create new apps and how to make those apps get to market and create value. So I'm saying to you and to the parents, choose your poison. You're either going to get on board and be a part of the 21st century, or you're going to lose your ability to even be a value creator or have value going forward. Yeah?
Thank you so much for that answer. We'll have one last question coming from...
Yes, this is Dr. Goss from the Institute of Caribbean Studies. A question about pushback and resistance, because all brilliant ideas coming out of the South will face resistance from the West and the North. What are some of the guarantees looking ahead at the projects? Because hopefully it works well, and if it works well, it will have significant impact on the Western world and their finance. So just looking down the road, are there plans for some kind of guarantee against pushback and resistance coming from, and even to intimidate our African and Caribbean politicians who make decisions that could have implications for this project?
I'd answer you by sharing something personal. A few weeks ago, I appeared at a function, and a longtime friend of mine called me and said, "Why do you don't keep yourself quiet? Don't you realize you're 90? Just, relax." And I said to the person, no, as long as I live and I have some mental acuity, I can't live to see everything that I have ever striven for going in reverse. The pushback which you anticipate is already taking place. I don't have to go into the evidence to support that statement. But in my view, and from my experience, perhaps the pushback is compelling us to do what we have long been talking about doing, and those before us. as students here, we couldn't really understand why the problems which existed and the solutions which we saw as obvious weren't being applied. When we left here in our respective fields, we endeavored as we could in our several ways to realize certain goals and certain objectives. At the present time, almost everything that we have striven for is in danger of being not just reversed, destroyed. Now, let me share this with you. This center, or the institute, which began as a center, when Professor Lewis was with us. Within the first month of our existence came COVID. And COVID demonstrated to us how the inequities which have prevailed in the global system were so manifest as to compel us to have the ability to deal with the problems which we didn't start, but from which we were suffering ourselves. So among the things would have been the capacity to develop our own vaccines. We can't live in a world where something happens, a global pandemic, and we have to wait until countries develop 3 times the supplies that they need before we can get some from the stock which they have accumulated. So I have no doubt whatsoever that we're going to get some pushback, but Afrexim Bank exists to promote development, to give us an exercise of control over our own resources, both intellectual and natural. The P.J. Patterson Institute for Advocacy was established by this university for that very purpose. And that's precisely why we have combined to undertake a project of this kind, because we realize that in a world driven by artificial intelligence and technology, we must create our own. If we don't create our own, it's not only a question of our being left behind. We are going to be plunged into utter darkness.
Yeah, can I just have a quick follow-up on that? Right? So, this is a question, this is an issue that the Honorable Statesman and I have many conversations about, and why I want the Honorable Statesman to be the statesman, the global statesperson for this project. My response to your question would be slightly different. Here's how I respond to it. Every time there's a disruption in the world, COVID, disruption creates new opportunities for a different kind of enlightened entrepreneurial and value creation. So as we speak, with the statesman being there and with people knowing that the advisory group for this project that I put together, it includes someone who, one of my students who met him in 19, he was kind enough to greet my student in 2001 when the student came here to present at the Ministry of Finance work that we were doing. That student now, right, runs a $45 billion enterprise that specializes in building data centers, right, and connecting submarine cables. We have another person, right, one of my trustees who is from Cuba, who built the entire AI system for Cisco, right? And so we have on the advisory board 6 or 7 folks who are among the leaders in the United States on doing this. Why are they interested? Enlightened self-interest. COVID now makes them want to secure their supply chain, want to make sure that all their critical issues are in a space where they can be fully partnered with it. They want to nearshore and what they call friendshore these critical issues. And so they then are seeking partnerships, right, of enlightened cooperation to ensure that what Mr. Patterson just spoke up never ever happens to them again where they're caught unprepared. Okay. So they're doing the near shoring and the friend shoring. So I just say to you that there's also that dimension which I need to make sure is under Mr. Patterson to make sure that it does not become an exclusively structure.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We have come to the end. We have come to the end of our question and answer segment, and thanking you so much for participating for those media outlets. We now turn over to Professor Ramsey. For those persons who are interested to have further dialogue, you can do so after. Professor Ramsey.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williamson. Thank you to everyone. I want to sincerely thank you all for being present today. It's your presence that has helped to ensure the success of this press conference. Without you, it wouldn't have happened. And so I really want to thank you for being here. Miss Williamson will be doing bookings especially with, I guess, radio and television. Those persons who want to have further conversations with Professor Hutchinson. He has some time, I think tomorrow, that he will make himself available for you to interview him in your respective media houses. So you can make the bookings with UE Marketing through Miss Williamson. I want to encourage you to visit our website so that you can get, I know that some of you are hearing about us for the first time, and even some of my dear colleagues who are right across at Social Sciences from us, who have never come over to have coffee with us. I'm not picking on anybody who is right in front of me, but you're welcome to come over and visit us. You're welcome. We are there, and we are very welcoming and warm and friendly and nice people, and we'll give you coffee. So visit the website to see some of the other activities that we have been doing. Also, if you would like to become a friend of the Institute or an associate of the Institute, you can contact us. Use the information on the website to contact us or call us. The UE website itself has our website. You know how to go on the UE website and find different entities. So you can send us an email. You can email me, the same uemona.edu, right? Paulette.ramsey, UIIMona, whatever, or anybody else with probably a little more complicated email. but there it's easy to contact us. We invite you to become a friend or an associate and to follow us on social media and to attend our many activities, okay, our public lectures, etc., etc. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the press conference. We've been here now for 2 hours, and I want to thank MITS, Mr. Preston and his team, and for their willingness to come to the aid of everybody across the UII. I again want to thank those persons who are online. I'm not sure. Mr. Preston, can you give us I don't know who can give us an idea of how many persons have been online, but I would be interested in knowing that. But I'm especially happy that my colleague, Professor Hopeton Duncan, well, I should say former colleague because he's now a professor at the University of Botswana, but that he has joined us online. So, Professor Dunn, you know we are happy that you have joined us. He is a friend of the Institute, and we have formal collaborations with the University of Botswana. I hope I have not forgotten anyone. Everybody who is here today is welcome. I thank all the persons who participated. I invite you to take up your other questions with Dr. Hutchinson if he is not too hungry now at this stage to talk to you. But certainly Ms. Williamson will be making arrangements for you to speak to him, whether publicly or privately, after this. Thank you all very much for being here.